So, welcome to the Bold Story Press Publishing webinar. I'm Emily Barros, and I'm the founder of Bold Story Press. I have closer to 40 years of publishing experience. I worked in the traditional publishing industry for 38 years. And during that time, I published hundreds of best-selling books, mostly nonfiction. When I started out in publishing, we followed an apprenticeship type model in the industry. And so college graduates got out of school and they headed to the Big Apple because they wanted to be, a famous publishing editor. And we started out as editorial assistants, where we were paid $10,000 a year. And learned the business slowly but surely by doing each of the jobs in the business. So I started out as an editorial assistant, and then I became a sales rep. We were required to get sales experience. Then I became a marketing manager, though I knew I wanted to be an editorial. As I said, we were required to have this experience across the business so that we better understood why people bought the books that they did, how books became best-selling books, and the best way to do that was actually to spend time understanding how to market books, how to sell books, and then eventually how to acquire books that would become best-selling books for the company. So I was an editor, an acquisitions editor. Eventually, I was promoted to the role of publisher, and my last role in the industry was as a vice president and editor-in-chief of a division of McGraw-Hill in New York. Publishing today is very, very different than it was when I was starting out. We didn't have computers yet. And so we were using these typewriters. And I had never learned to type. I never took a course in typing. So I really struggled, boy, learning, self-teaching how to type during those early years. But then along came the computer and everything changed. The industry was getting smaller as big companies bought up the smaller companies and then the middle-sized companies. Eventually, they gobbled each other up until there were only 5 trade companies really left in the U.S. And interestingly, none of them are U.S. owned. They're all owned by the Europeans. The digitization of content changed everything. It changed bookstores. There used to be many bookstore chains in the United States, and now there's only one remaining. That's Barnes and Noble. There were many, many, many more independent bookstores. They've all gone belly up and out of business because Amazon came onto the scene, and Amazon sells 80% of all book sales today. And then, of course, ebooks came into being. They have had an impact on book sales as more and more people are buying content for their Kindles or their ebook readers. So the industry doesn't look at all like it did 40 years ago. If you want to write and publish a book, I think it's important for you to consider and be aware of what your motivation is. And I used to talk to my authors about this in the early days before we signed the books. I've worked with authors who have had the following motivations, and I've seen some of them succeed and I've seen some of them fail. So there's no one motivation that guarantees success, but I think it's important to be aware of why you want to write and publish that book. Some authors write because they're passionate about their topic and they want to share that passion with others and infect others with that passion. And those authors tend to be nonfiction writers. I worked in college textbooks for many years, and certainly the authors we most liked to sign were those who were doing research in their area of expertise and who were excited about their area of expertise and wanted to share that passion. Some authors talk about having a story inside of them that they need to get out. And sometimes that's just a story idea. Maybe it's even partially filled out in some form. Occasionally, I've heard authors describe having a fully formed book with inside of them, and that they really just need to get it out onto the page, that they're almost channeling the book. Some authors write to make money. There are far fewer of them today than there were 20 years ago, but some authors write with that motivation. Some authors write to establish themselves as an expert or an authority in their field, and we see more and more entrepreneurs and people who are launching new businesses who want to author a book, because when you can say, I've written a book and published it in my field, people instantly assign you credibility, and they think of you as an expert. Even if that book isn't very good, even if no one ever actually buys that book except your mother, and a few loved ones, when people hear that you're an author in your field, they assume you're an expert. And some authors write to leave a legacy, and we are seeing more and more authors of memoirs who want to leave the story of either their own story, life story, for their children and future generations. And they may want to write the family history, the family generational story, to capture that as part of a legacy. It's also important to be aware of your target market and for whom you are writing your book. We asked authors to actually fill out the marketing forms before they started writing or early on in the writing process, because we wanted them to have a very clear idea of who their reader is, so that when they hit stumbling blocks or writer's block, or they got stuck in certain areas, they could think about who that reader was and what that reader would want to see. Would they need more explanation or examples to help them understand the content? So it's important to think about who will want your book, who will pay for your book. That one's very important. What do you know about them, and how are you going to reach them? My mouse is a little jumpy today. You also should be thinking about, to become the published author you wish to be, do you need to make any changes in yourself or your routine? If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. That's a quote from Henry Ford. It's certainly been my experience in life. And so if you are someone who has been saying, I'm going to publish my book someday, but you have not written any more of your manuscript, and you have not changed anything about your day-to-day life or your day-to-day routine, you may not make that goal. I also love this quote, and especially as it pertains to women authors. This is from Marianne Williamson. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. And I should tell you here that the reason I started Bold Story Press 3 years ago was because it was the summer of 2020. COVID was we were 3 months, I think, into the COVID epidemic and scared and not knowing what was going to happen next. The world was chaotic, at least from my vantage point. What was happening in the world politically, environmentally, across the board, things seemed crazy to me, and I was worried. And I thought, if half of the decision makers in Congress were women, we would not be in this position. And I believe that strongly, that if half the decision makers in the world were women in corporate America, in the media, certainly in politics, that the world would be in a better place. And so I thought about, well, what can I do to affect that? And I thought about the fact that during my 38 years in the industry, that I was aware that there were hurdles and obstacles that women authors faced that men did not. And as a result, men have a much higher incidence of best-selling books than women. Many more awards are written by men. And for a very long time, many more books were being accepted by and published by traditional publishers, authored by men than by women. And I think there were many reasons for it, but I began to think, if I can do anything to help women be comfortable owning their power, if I can help women either in my generation, my peers, or in the generations following us, to step up and own their power and act on that power, that the world will be a better place. And so that's why I decided to start Bold Story Press and to make it a platform for women authors only. So we only publish women, and our intent is in that process to help more women share their stories of success and failure in ways that will help future generations of women own their power and have greater success. There are 5 basic phases in the publishing process, and I'm going to cover them kind of quickly just to give you an idea of what the process looks like when you sign and publish a book. Writing is the obvious first step. You can't publish a book until you have content, and writing is critical to getting a book published. There is no one writing style that guarantees success. I guess there are many writing styles, but I think of 2 as being the most prevalent. One is the organized writer, the writer who sits down and creates an outline of their book and thinks through each chapter. And then after they've created their table of contents, they go in and they put down another layer of detail. So they put the A heads in within the chapter, and then they'll go back and maybe add B heads to the chapter. Then they go back and they write out a description of what that chapter encompasses, and so on, adding more layers of content and detail until they've written and fleshed out the whole book. The second style of writing that I see most frequently, and I put myself in this category, though I often wish I was part of that first category. The second category, we call them pantsers. And that's because we are more inclined to fly by the seat of our pants. And that means that when we are writing, for me, what that looks like is I sit down at the computer and I download everything in my head about the topic, about the content that I want to share. I just download it all onto the page. And after I've written down every idea that I have, every piece of knowledge that I have, every anecdote that I might want to share, I may also include a list of topics or areas where I know I need to do further research before I can complete my body of work. And so I start with that big pile of content, and then I start to work through it, winnowing out the content that doesn't belong, adding content where it is needed until the body of work starts to take the shape that I want. As I said, there's no one writing style that guarantees success, but usually writers fall into one of those two camps. Most writers have to do some form of research in the process of writing. Certainly, if you are writing nonfiction, you're going to be doing research. But even with fiction, if you are writing historical fiction, if you are setting your story in another place or time, you will want to do the research to make sure that you're getting the facts right, that your city is in fact the way you describe it, that history is unfolding the way you are describing it, because readers will forgive a factual error in a book, but they won't forgive many. And so if you make one, I think most readers will forgive you, two maybe, but once you exceed that number, you are going to start losing readers. They don't find you credible anymore, and they give up on the book. Book coaches are a fairly new phenomena. I didn't even become aware of book coaches probably until about 6 or 7 years ago. I've run into two kinds of book coaches. One kind of book coach is the coach who is trained in coaching and therefore knows how to hold you accountable, knows how to help motivate you and keep you on track, but may not be able to add any expertise to your development of the content. The other kind of book coach that I've come across, and I've seen authors have greater success with, are coaches that are trained to be developmental editors or at least copy editors. And so they are able to read your content when you're submitting, when you've met your deadlines and you're submitting chapters, and give you feedback and tell you if you are writing clearly, if your story needs to be changed or modified in any way as you are developing the content. And then finally, if you want to write and publish a book, or actually I should say finally, if you want to publish a book, but you don't have the skill to write it yourself and you don't have the desire to develop that skill, you can hire a ghostwriter to write your book. Ghostwriters are, it's not hard to find ghostwriters. It's not hard to find good ghostwriters, but they are expensive. And if you are hiring a good ghostwriter, it's going to cost you 6 figures to publish your book. If you are going to write and publish that book, I strongly recommend that you make a commitment to writing every day. And certainly successful published authors do that routinely. They write every day, either with a goal of a number of hours that they spend at the computer working, where they are writing, developing new content, not editing content that they wrote the day before, but writing, generating new content. And then some authors will set a number of words goal for themselves each day. So I'm going to sit down and I will not stop until I've written 3,000 words or 5,000 words. If you read any of the books on writing, Stephen King's book, for example, they will all tell you that having a regular routine for your writing is so important. And he describes in the beginning when he started writing, how he would walk into his office each day at the same time and sit at his computer and write. And he believes that over time, when he opened that computer each day, that he was training his muse to show up at that time, just like Pavlov's dogs. So writing on a regular basis with a routine and a commitment to being consistent with writing that content is important. You will have to learn to self-edit, and every writer does this. I've never, ever seen a writer write perfect prose first time with a first draft. That's impossible. As we're writing, we are in the flow, we are in the stream of generating content. We make mistakes, we leave out articles, we misspell words, and so when you will learn to go back through your manuscript and catch those mistakes, add content or new content where it's needed, but learning to self-edit is an important skill that you'll develop. It's important to get objective feedback on your content during the process. And by objective, I don't mean so much our loved ones, your husband, wife, children, your friends. In my experience, I've found that our loved ones are much more comfortable talking about the things that they can say that are positive about the writing. And so they will look for those things in order to share them with you. They're not as comfortable giving you feedback that is negative or even constructive. And so you can't rely on only the people who don't want to hurt your feelings to give you feedback on your manuscript. Because again, I've worked with many, many authors over the years, and I have never met an author whose manuscript was not helped, usually considerably helped, by a good editor. And so we all need editorial feedback. We all need constructive criticism to make our writing stronger. And then finally, I strongly recommend that you read other authors' books, good books, while you are writing. Read books in your genre. If you are writing a memoir, you should be reading best-selling memoirs out there and look at the way other authors create the story around their content, how they format their story, how they organize the flow, the kinds of vocabulary that they use, the tenses that they use. All of these things inform your writing on some level, and so it's important for you to be reading other writers as you're developing your own content. Editing, again, is important. Developmental editing is the most expensive, it's the most sophisticated, it's the most detailed editing that you can commission for your work. A developmental editor is not reading for grammar or punctuation errors, though they often will correct them as they find them. A good developmental editor is reading for the larger macro issues. They're reading to see if your story arc makes sense. If you are developing a sense of tension for your reader such that they want to stay engaged and want to keep turning the page to read all of it. They're reading for character development. Are all of your characters unlikable? Well, that could be a problem in fiction writing. Your dialogue, how are your characters communicating with each other, and are they credible, and is it believable? So there is so much value that a good developmental editor can add to a manuscript. In nonfiction writing, they're reading as a novice would read your material, and they're able to tell you, I don't understand this. You know, you need to add more descriptive information here. You need to add more examples in order to help the reader understand this concept here. So good developmental editors are worth their weight in gold. Copy editors will do some of the work that the developmental editor does, but they are generally reading for grammar, for punctuation, and for issues of style. The copy editor, every publishing house follows a style manual. Most of us follow the Chicago Manual of Style. And so that your writing is consistent, both within your work and with the body of work available out there in the trade, your copy editor will be checking your manuscript against the Chicago Manual of Style and making sure that your manuscript is consistent throughout. And then finally, after the book has been typeset, you'll have a proofread of your manuscript, and a proofreader will go through and read for anything that the copy editor missed in terms of grammar or punctuation. And they'll also be reading for any errors or issues that may have been introduced in the process of typesetting. Sometimes typesetters will include a space where it's not needed, or will accidentally cut off a word at the end of a sentence, or cut off the letter from the last word in a sentence. So the proofreader is reading both to catch anything that the developmental editor and copy editor may not have caught, and then also to catch anything that the typesetter may have created in your manuscript. Design is a part of the process that most of my authors really enjoy. It's in the design process that we sit down with the author and the designer and talk through what the genre is for the book, what the look and feel is that the author wants to create with the cover and with the interior design. We ask them to bring us samples of competing books, or even just covers that they love, that they've seen in trade books, and we ask them to bring examples of covers that they hate. And through this discussion and this process, our designers get a better idea of how to come up with the right cover design for a book and the right interior design. And the production process is everything that happens with the book after the manuscript is considered final. The editors are done with their work, and now our production team takes the book and takes it through all of those steps that a book must go through in order to end up as a printed and bound book, or as an ebook, or as an audiobook. And so in that process, here are some examples of decisions that are made and work that's done. We'll have to choose the trim size for the book. Will it be 5x8 or 6x9 or 8x10? Will it be hardbound with a cloth cover and a jacket? Will it be only available in paperback? Will we make it available in ebooks form and audiobook form? What kind of paper should we be printing on? Is it going to be white or cream colored paper? Should it be 50-pound paper or 70-pound paper? To some extent, the genre will dictate some of these decisions, but if you decided to self-publish your book, you will need to educate yourself about these decisions so that you're making the right decisions for your book. We do the metadata research, and that is such an important part of the process, because today we think, we're not sure, we think that there are 4 million books being published every year. The reason we're not sure is because Amazon KDP does not publish those numbers. They don't tell us how many books they're publishing a year. And the huge majority of books that are being published each year are Word files that authors uploaded themselves to KDP in order to publish their book. But with 4 million books being published each year, that's something like 800 books a day. And the sheer volume, the sheer numbers makes it harder for authors and publishers to reach their target market for a book. And so getting the metadata research right is critical to help you reach those potential buyers of your book and readers of your book through Amazon and through Google. You'll have to get your ISBNs for the book. You'll need to register the copyright. You'll need to register the book with the Library of Congress. And in the case of ebooks and audiobooks, you will need to format or reformat your book files in order to create either versions and upload them to the appropriate distributors. And then finally, when you've been through that whole process and you have book files that are ready to go, it's time to start thinking about launching your book. And launching the book is all about promotion and marketing. And there are many ways to launch and promote a book. You will want to create a book launch team, and that's whether you are working with a traditional publisher and an agent or self-publishing. No matter how you publish your book, you will be responsible for some, if not all, of the marketing. And so you will want to create that team of friends and family and people who can help you spread the word about the book. You may decide to hire a publicist to help you get reviews in the New York Times or Publishers Weekly. You will want to design a marketing strategy and create a marketing calendar, and you will want to get reviews of your book, and not just the critical editorial reviews, but also the Amazon reviews and Goodreads reviews in order to help your book be more successful on those platforms. There are 3 basic types of publishers available to most authors. The 4th category isn't really a publisher. I'll tell you more about that. With a traditional publisher, and that's Penguin and Random House, Simon & Schuster, you must have an agent to have your book considered by a traditional publisher. When I was starting out as an editorial assistant, there was another editorial assistant a few desks down, and I stayed in the nonfiction side of publishing and in educational publishing for many years. She moved over to trade publishing and went to HarperCollins, where she eventually became the editor-in-chief for the children and young adult fiction list. And she told me that it was 35 years ago or 30 years ago when the publishers had reached the point where they simply could not keep up with the sheer number of unsolicited manuscripts that were coming in every day. They were up to 35,000 unsolicited manuscripts, and they realized that to continue with their business, they really had to create a gatekeeper in between themselves and the writing public. And that's when they decided to make agents those gatekeepers, and they started to require that any manuscript that they consider for publication had to already be vetted by an agent and have come to them through an agent. And all of the other major publishers quickly followed suit. And so today, if you don't have an agent, you are not going to be published by a traditional publisher. The traditional publishing business model usually looks something like this. If you are an unknown author, you are offered, perhaps you are offered some kind of advance, maybe it's $5,000. maybe it's $15,000. That advance is not a gift. It is an interest-free loan, and you will pay it back when the book starts to sell before you start to accrue royalties. Then the publisher assigns the editors and the designers and the production team, and you don't have any expenses through that process. And then when the book publishes, the publisher gives you, the author, a royalty on the sales after they've recovered that advance. And usually that royalty is somewhere between 8 and 12%. So typically, unknown authors, new authors are getting 10% of royalty. Self-publishing means that you are doing all of that work yourself. You're finding the editors and hiring them. You're finding the designers and hiring them. And you are educating yourself about the production process. And there's plenty of content and information out there on Google. So it's very doable, but it's very time intensive. And you have to really commit time to learning how to self-publish. And then the other challenge with self-publishing is that there are many editors and designers out there who are available for hire, but some of them are scammers. Some of them are just not very good. And many people, many authors don't know how to determine if this editor that they're paying $4,000, $5,000 to is really good and is going to help them sell more copies. And so with that self-publishing process, you pay all the expenses, of course, as you go. And when the book publishes, you keep all of the royalties. They're paid directly into your account. And then hybrid publishers, and Bold Story Press is a hybrid publisher. Hybrid publishers came into being to give authors a choice of a publishing option in between those two options, the traditional publisher and the self-publishing option. And the way we do that, the way that's done, our team at Bold Story Press, we are all traditionally trained publishing professionals. Every one of my team, designers and editors and production managers, worked in traditional publishing for the big five or for other publishers for many, many years. And so we have lots of experience publishing traditionally published books. We don't take on the copyright of our books as traditional publishers do. We have our authors keep the copyright, and so they maintain full rights to their books. And we ask the authors to pay a fee upfront to help defray the costs of editorial and design. And then through the process of publishing, your attention from the team is very different than it would be from a traditional publisher. We really hold the hands of our authors and take them through the process in a way that we didn't have time to do with our authors in traditional publishing. And when the book publishes, we pay the author 60% of the print royalty and 70% of the ebook and audiobook royalty. So hybrid publishers are another choice. A good hybrid publisher, it has a curated list. They don't accept all manuscripts for publication. If we did, we would be a vanity press, and we are not. So we reject about 60% of the manuscripts we receive at Bold Story Press, and most hybrid publishers do the same. And then finally, editorial service providers are companies that exist to help you publish your book. And they're either taking you through the process to self-publish your book, or they may be a vanity press where they are publishing any book if the author has the money, and it really has nothing to do with the quality of the content. So I don't call them publishers, but those businesses exist to help you get your book published. Another quote that I loved, "Those who tell the stories rule the world." I do believe that. If you're on social media, I'd love it if you like us or follow us at Bold Story Press, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We're at Bold Story Press. And I hope this presentation is giving you some useful and helpful information to help you figure out how you will share your story with the world. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I am happy to answer any questions you may have. You can either raise your hand by going down to the bottom and raising your hand there, or just raise your hand and I'll see you, or just take yourself off mute and ask a question. I'm happy to answer any that I can. Evelyn.
Hi.
Hi.
I'd like to know, what genres are you looking for in particular?
We publish both fiction and nonfiction. We do not publish children's picture books, and we do not publish poetry right now. It's not that we wouldn't like to publish poetry, but right now, poetry makes us a little nervous because it's hard to edit poetry because each word is so important and so precise. And so right now we're not publishing poetry, but we are publishing nonfiction books and novels.
In the area of fiction, what are you particularly looking for? Any particular genres or?
No, no particular genres. You know, we ask our authors to send us a book proposal that basically tells us, you know, what the plot line is, what the story is, and we ask them to send us at least 3 chapters, and we read those 3 chapters and determine, you know, if we think you can write, and if we think you need help with that writing, you know, we'll tell you that. And if we think that the content isn't good enough to be on our list, we'll tell you that too.
Thanks.
Yeah. So Rana.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for the presentation. My question to you is a little bit similar to Evelyn's, which is, who is your ideal author? And do they have to be US based?
Oh, no, they do not have to be US based. We have an author in Lebanon, we have an author in Italy. And since we just started Bold Story Press 3 years ago, we've signed 36 books and we've published 27 of them so far. So no, we do have authors. Everything is virtual now. The world is virtual. So there really are no limitations for working with authors outside of the US.
Mm-hmm. I think I know the author in Lebanon because I found out about you through her book. She's actually a family friend.
Oh, yes,
yeah.
I love Amal.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's wonderful.
Yeah.
Who is the ideal author? Well, first of all, you're a good writer and you have a story to share that we think will either entertain people or in some way make the world better. One of the reasons we reject books, it's not that often that this comes up, but occasionally we come across books that we think are too violent or too negative, or that they aren't adding anything of value to the world, and we reject them for that reason. So the content has to be a good match for our list, and the writing skill has to be there. And then we're looking for someone who is a collaborative person, you know, who wants to learn the process and work through the process with us. And as I said, we do spend a lot of time with our authors and give them a lot of attention. So yeah, those are the kinds of authors we like to sign.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Sure. Mackenzie.
Thank you. Agreed. This has been so helpful. I had a question about developmental editing, and if you're publishing like a series of essays, how does the developmental editor come in and help you?
I'm sorry, how do they?
Like, what are they looking for, I guess, or what are they looking to fix? If you're publishing a series of essays.
So are these previously published essays?
No, I put together about like 35 essays. They're all around the same topic.
Okay.
But I guess I feel like I'm not looking for any help on story arc or character development or stuff like that.
Yeah, so they will read the individual essays and give you feedback about how they read and whether or not they think they need either more or different prose. And then they will also comment on how the 35 fit together, and whether they fit together and whether some of them should go and be replaced by something else. They will comment on the body of work because presumably you have a plan, a strategy, a reason you put these 35 together, and they'll tell you if they think you accomplished that goal. Yeah. Gimbaya?
Very close.
Is it Gimbia?
Gimbia, yes.
Gimbia, okay.
And again, as everybody said, just thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it. I had some numbers questions and was just really interested. You've been in the business for 3 years, which I love because I think it's time that you now have some data on your end. So I'm curious how many books you've worked with, what percent of those actually are headed towards completion, if there are any that have dropped out in the process. I'm definitely curious about what is the average payment for the authors to be participating and working with you. And then are any of your authors making money? I mean, that's one of the things that you've asked, that you sort of listed as motivations for writing. And I'll be honest, it's part of my life.
Yeah.
I'm not seeking to establish authority. I guess that's the trade-off.
Yeah.
But want to just sort of think that through is something that is important to me, both in terms of how that looks down the road and where, what does an author's career look like with you 18 months to 3 years later? What does that journey look like, post-publication? And I actually don't even know, on average, how long you spend from the time you say, yes, we'd love to work with you on your manuscript to the time I would be holding it.
Yeah, well, so this is an excellent question. And usually the process takes a year. It is not a year to take a manuscript from draft to published book, but in trade publishing, if you want to get reviews from Kirkus or Publishers Weekly or Library Journal, you have to send them an ARC, which is an advanced reader copy. We used to send galleys to that publication at least 4 months before the publication of the book, because they don't want to publish reviews of books that are already published. And they receive thousands and thousands, of manuscript, of books. So they're fitting you into a schedule. And so usually we take the book, it takes about 6 months to take the book through the process of editorial, design, and production. And then we stop at that point, create the advanced reader copies, and that's when the promotion and marketing starts. And usually then the pub date is, 4 to 6 months later. Because it takes a year to actually publish the book, I don't have that much data yet, to be honest. We have a few books that have been out more than 18 months. And I'll tell you a few things. One, don't write books to make money. It's not realistic. It is so hard to do, really. Because there are something like 800 books being published every hour now. And finding your target reader, just reaching through all the clutter, of all the things that are bombarding people on Amazon and on social media, to tell them that your book exists is really hard. It's hard to do. And so major publishers, trade publishers, won't sign you unless you can provide evidence that you already have a following, that you either have a following on social media, that you have a mailing list of 5,000 names, that you have a community of people out there who are waiting for this book and who will know it exists when it publishes. So getting to those readers and getting the word out takes time. And most authors aren't that successful with it, frankly, with their first book. Usually an author develops a following over writing a series of books, and the readers read the second book, like it, and they go back and buy the first book. A reader reads the fourth book and likes it and goes back and buys the first and second and third. And so you could have great success as a new author, but the odds are not in your favor, to be perfectly honest. And so what I tell our authors is, don't do this if breaking even or making money is critical to you, because the odds are not in your favor. At McGraw-Hill, and I have my own sales force, and I had a whole marketing department, to market my books. When I would do studies of our book sales over time, the average book over, a 5-year period sold 2,000 copies. That's 400 books a year, and that's with a sales force and a marketing department. So when you are publishing, with a hybrid publisher or even with a major trade publisher, it is tricky and it is hard. And you should know all of that before you sign anything or enter into this. But the process of writing should give you joy. The process of publishing your book should give you joy, and you should be able to live with the possible outcome that it may not be a break-even proposition, because otherwise you'll be disappointed.
I really appreciate your upfrontness about that. I really appreciate that, and I definitely think it's important to be reminded of. And it's part of why I asked her, like, what is the actual investment on that? I'm young and I'm black,
Now,
right? Like, no, I just want to be really real. Like, I'm young and I'm black, and I don't enter with intergenerational family wealth supporting any conversation about I love the writing process. I love a lot of stuff, so the publishing thing is a separate stream for me, but it isn't it isn't that I haven't got the platform personally, financially, to say. So that's why I really need to ask about the numbers so directly.
Yeah. We follow up the webinar today with an email to each of you, offering a phone call if you'd like to talk one-on-one with me about your manuscript or about your book. And Gimby, I want to encourage you to set up a call, because I'd be very happy to give you some advice and some thoughts about, where you are and being realistic. But if you love to write, I think there's a path for you, but I wouldn't throw it all in. I'd be measured.
I keep my day job. I do.
Yeah. Don't quit the day job. Right. Is it Goli or Gali?
Goli, yes.
Goli.
Thank you. Yes, just to echo everyone else's appreciation, this has been really helpful. Could you talk a little bit about, you touched on this in the response to the last question about first-time authors versus authors that are, the first time they would be publishing, and also who are not professional writers, right? Who might have a really compelling story that they just really need to get out and want to get out, but may not publish again. So I would or may, who knows, but, just based on what you just said about like the likelihood of not finding success the first time around, I guess I would like to know, like, how would one feel incentivized to do that if you think it's going to be a one-time thing, but also more about you as a publisher, your commitment to those types of potential authors.
Okay. So we do, having said all that, by the way, no one's asked me what our fee is up front, so let me tell you. We charge $12,000 up front. You can pay that over a series of payments. And sometimes that's a little less based on the size of the manuscript, and sometimes it could be a little more if you need heavy developmental editing. And so we have had or do have authors that will break even, and we do have authors who will make a profit. But they came to the process with a following, with a community, either on social media or a mailing list. And so they were able to tell people that their book existed, and they saw sales like in early days because people, bought the book as soon as it came out. Other authors of mine, they've had this lifelong goal of writing and publishing this story. And sometimes the process itself has given them great joy, and their husband is going through a midlife crisis and he bought a Lamborghini, and they say, well, I'm going to spend $20,000 on publishing this book and marketing it, and it's going to give me joy, and this is my Lamborghini. Well, if you have $20,000, that's great. I mean, and that's the way you want to spend that. I think that's great. And some authors have something to share that's important enough to them that they feel like if only 50 women read this and I somehow touch them or have some impact in their life, this will be worth it to me. And I have the money, and I'm not going to be financially in trouble. So I think you have to think about what your motivation is, but I hate the idea that anyone thinks that the only way to measure success is through the break-even number, because it's not. And I can give you 6 authors right now to talk to who've been through the process, and they can tell you that they haven't made a lot of money yet, but that the process has changed their life. Well, I have an author who's 83. She published a memoir called Feisty. She was a Washington, D.C. lawyer who did all these interesting things, wrote this beautiful memoir, and now she's going around giving talks to women's groups about writing and sharing their story and owning their power. And it is giving her so much joy. At 83 years old, she is having a blast. And so you don't even know, all the ways that this could impact your life positively, but it's important to be aware, to have your eyes open. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, that was really helpful. I mean, I think the other piece of the question is really sort of from what lens do you guys look at selecting authors? Like the first-time author, like, I don't want to use the word discriminate, but do you look at that with more of a critical eye than if you would somebody who wants to make public, to write and publish a lifetime goal and, part of their career, so to speak?
No.
Okay.
Because this frankly feels like mission work to us.
Yes.
Most of us are semi-retired from traditional publishing, and we are doing it because we love it. And frankly, we probably have a preference for the first group rather than the second. So yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions?
Do you encourage authors to enter competitions with their novels?
What kind of competition?
Well, there are competitions where they're looking for novels to turn into screenplays.
I'm sorry, say that again?
There are competitions where the judges are looking for novels to turn into screenplays.
Oh, yeah. I mean, frankly, I encourage authors to get as much feedback and information as they possibly can. I also encourage authors to submit to agents and to other publishers. I mean, the more you learn about the process, the better you'll know who the right partner is for you. And if you submit your book in a competition like that, you may get feedback that's really helpful, and make revisions based on that feedback that will help you get it published. Yeah, so I do. I think that's a great idea. Any other story or questions? Sorry. Yes, Rana.
Sorry, I just had another question, which is what if I understand a bit that obviously there are costs to editing and to designing and to promoting and to all these things. But I'm wondering what is the difference in that case between a hybrid publisher and the last category you mentioned, which is the editorial service provider or the vanity publisher?
Well, the biggest differences are you'll have a team of people know how to publish. We approach the process as it's our job to make our books as successful as possible. It's our job to make sure our author and our company is never embarrassed by anything we put out there. Someone asked about books that we let go, and in 3 years and 36 books, there are 2 books that we had to cancel. And one of them was because we make the decision based on 3 chapters, but when we dove in and read the rest of the chapters, we realized there was content there that we thought was inappropriate for the general trade market and sexual content, and we didn't want to be affiliated with it, and the author didn't want to take it out, and so we agreed to go our separate ways. So we just gave the author the money back and we went our separate ways. If you have, if your manuscript is good and you just really need a good copy editor or proofreader, then that may be the right path for you. But if you really want a very experienced team who knows what they're doing to take you by the hand and spend all of the time it needs until it's right, that's what you're paying for really with a publisher like us. And the truth is that the trade, so now I'm talking about Amazon as a distributor and Ingram as a distributor, they often can tell when a book is self-published. Like Barnes and Noble doesn't like to order books for the bookstore if it was self-published. And, that wouldn't happen with one of our books, but because it's not self-published. So, that's another risk in doing it through a company like that. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Sure. All right, well, I'm going to wrap it up here, and you'll each get an email, and I'd love to talk to you one-on-one if that would be helpful to you. Good luck to you with your writing. I hope that you do publish. I'd love to see your manuscript if you'd like to talk to us about it, but if you don't, I hope you will find a way to share your writing with the world. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Bye. Oh, I didn't see the chat. I'm just reading the chat, Rana.
Oh, is there such a big chat? I didn't see such a big chat.
Yeah.
I'm just going to ask you very, very quickly one last question. You mentioned 3 chapters. Do they have to be the first 3 chapters?
No, you decide.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Because I feel I need help with the beginning. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I'm very happy with the rest of it.
Yeah. have you talked to Amal since she published?
No, I haven't.
You should. You should ask her.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
thinking that I want to.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope that she would have good things to say about her editorial experience, because I know that the editor who worked on her book worked very hard to help her. And was really pleased with the outcome. And I think Amal was very pleased too.
Yeah, she's a good writer. I like the way she writes. I don't want to take any more of your time. I'll definitely be scheduling that call,
Perfect.
and
Good.
and we can speak then. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Rana. Bye.
Bye. Bye.